know that the best is yet to come. Now take me somewhere new. Honey, honey, you were right. Let's get together one more time. You gotta see this view. Things are much better with you, much better with you. Think I'll hold
Just a nice happy thing about instead of grabbing a bite, sit down with somebody.
much better with you.
When I was in college, we had a thing where I cooked 4 meals a week and did the grocery shopping, and the roommates, 3 other roommates, cleaned. And all of them said, after the year we spent together, that was one of the best things we did. Was we came home from class and we ate together and we talked about stuff. And that's part of humanity. It's one of the core pieces of being human. So don't forget that on the holidays, especially you grab a meal generation. That's one of the things my wife did with our kids, and I think it was really good. This I thought was funny, and I meant to cover it yesterday. In Chicago, the Jackson Hole Travel and Tourism Agency decided to hang ski lifts in the bus stop enclosures. In Chicago, they have warming areas, and they even have heaters up at the top. So if you think it's terrible that some people live in the cold and snow and wind, it could be worse. But it, it is a specially constructed bench. Apparently, it is anchored. I was hoping it was a swinging bench, but it is. That would be nice, swaying a little bit when you're waiting for the bus. But it is attractive and attention getting, and I think they only did a couple of them, but they did them in the right in downtown Ritzy area. So if there isn't any snow right now, so if you're dreaming about snow, you might want to get out to Jackson Hole because I think they have more snow than they do in Chicago. Okay, the big best ad of the year. I thought this was a really great ad. Best ad of the year in the UK or best ad series. Carlsberg, probably not the best beer in the world. And for decades they had this probably the best beer in the world, and it's not that great. Guinness in Dublin. I don't know if it counts as beer even. I count it as beer. Or, Weissbier in Bavaria. That kicks Carlson all over the table. So they just got honest about it and said, well, we're probably not the best beer in the world, but you know what? We might be a pretty good beer, and we're widely distributed, so you can get your hands on one. You don't have to go to Dublin or Berchtesgaden or someplace like that. And another article I'm not covering today, but I saw that there was a headline that said that Brexit would be good for pubs. I don't know why. It's something to do with going back to English beer, I think. Now, Carlsberg is Dutch, I believe. I think we should say Dutch beer. I don't know. It's not Danish. It's Danish. Dutch and Danish, I get mixed up, obviously, and it's not the roll. That's an American thing. Okay, so the next story. We're not spending too much time on that. Okay, and Summer Gould, who I always enjoy reading, cited a study from Demand Metric in partnership with PFL, whoever that is, where they studied multi-channel marketing maximizing program enhancement with ROI. Much as I like that title, just slips off the tongue. That's the study. That's not Summer's fault. The idea was to understand the importance of multi-channel marketing for international coordinated marketing efforts. And it's just hugely circular for a couple of reasons. One is that all they did, as far as I can tell, is ask the participants, how many channels do you do and how happy are you with them? So the only real hard data we have is this part, where email, 91% use email, and there were business to business and consumer, it seems. Social media, 81%. Events, they said, were the best way to reach the C-suite. Yeah, if you go to the shows that are elitist, if you go to the direct mail shows, the C-suite doesn't seem to come as much as they used to. And display ads, 60%. But I did appreciate this, that the majority of the participants, and maybe they picked them because of the mail. Who knows? It doesn't give. I don't have any idea of the sample size or the selection process, which is the way most surveys get screwed up. But the majority did use some direct mail, so that was good. And they also said that direct mail should get more attention from most marketers. It's hard because most people don't know how to do it. I was going to grab one of my little sample boxes. I think there's one over here. I dropped one. Nope. Or at any rate, I put them all back. We had some. Well, I can't assemble one for you, but I can kind of show it to you. We put it in this little box that I got from Uline, and you could shake it, and there was stuff in it, and there was another thing that was hard, a little puzzle, and a handwritten note, and they said 3D is a good thing. So I'm an advocate for direct mail. There's Summer. But let's go on and talk about Santa, because I really did want to get to that. Mark Ritson, who I always enjoy, has a metaphor about Santa's delivery. And the story goes that Santa was getting old, his knees were creaking, and his back was sore, and or his back was creaking and his knees were sore. And the business of getting presents from the sleigh down to thousands of chimneys, then under each tree, was proving harder and harder because he was doing it all by himself. The reindeer could deliver the packages, and in the story they have 12 hours to deliver. Now, I would think Mark would be really up on time zones because he seems to hang out in the UK and New Zealand and Australia, which is like a long ways away from each other. And so he would know that if Santa followed the sun and went east to west, he wouldn't have 12 hours, but he'd have 24. So he'd have 2 hours, basically 2 hours per time zone if you could move at the speed of light or something. But so Santa's, but anyway, the premise is that Santa's got his work cut out for him, and so Google, or Goggle, I'm sorry, respelled, not to get in trademark trouble. Goggle said, why don't I come along with you and I can help with the deliveries? I'm small and fast and squeeze through even the tiniest spaces. And then that worked so well in New Zealand that for Australia, which is spread out, record time, he said, "What do you have any buddies?" And Goggle said, "Yeah, my cousin Fuzzbuck," which I think it took me a while to realize that was Facebook. But anyway, and that went really well too. Santa did virtually nothing, and 20 minutes later, Santa and his elves were ready to go. And but then he went to China, and he decided that he would have 4 more elves. So now he's got 6 elves and 2 reindeer, and it didn't work so good. And he said, maybe I have too many elves. And what happened was that the elves showed him on the elf monitor that his deliveries were going faster than ever. Right? The packages per second were going super fast. So all the metrics were telling him that this was working, but it didn't seem to be working. And so he brought in 2 of the old elves, and the 2 old elves looked over the situation because when he got to Africa, he had a disaster. Because all the elves were telling him, you need more elves and fewer reindeer. But the problem that the older elves brought out was, and they kept saying, we'll need more elves and more elves. And finally, I think when they got to Africa, they they had all elves and no reindeer. And then the two old wise old elves, turned to their boss and said, you do need more elves when it comes to targeting each house and getting presents under the trees. They're short and they're good at getting in the chimneys. Okay? But you don't need this many. You need elves, but you don't need this many. You still need some reindeer to pull the sleigh. Now, I had something funny happen to me yesterday. He said, actually, you need about 5 reindeer, 4.8. Because what was happening was the sleigh wasn't getting down to the country and back with the presents. Once it got there, the elves were instant, but it took too long to get there. And Mark, unfortunately, doesn't give us much help in the metaphor. Um, but luckily, the old elves figured it out, and I take the place of the old elf, and because I'm tiny, if you're looking on your phone, I'm only like this big, and I'm going to take over the metaphor because why can't I, Mark? And I'll say I've got talking to a former client years and years ago, and I helped him start his business, helped him do the marketing way back, and but one of his employees is over here today or yesterday putting in a new blade server for our new clients that we've gotten now all of a sudden, and he said we had a big meeting and the founder said we're going to mail catalogs. It's like, the heck with digital. We're going to mail more catalogs. And I said, yeah, because when you mail catalogs, something happens, right? And he said, yeah, right. He said, we're going to grow, and we're going to grow by mailing more. And we're going to call John in. We're going to have him help us. Well, whoopee for that. Otherwise, I wouldn't know about it. But that's not the point. The point is that there's some heavy lifting. And my friend who's installing the blade servers from Russia, and he said, there's something real about a catalog. I said, yeah, and your competitors can copy you on digital, but it's really hard to copy you in a catalog. That's just the facts, right? You need some heavy lifting. And I would say if you're in retail, we had this case study that I talk about regularly where the retailer thought that if they had a good enough website and enough email, they didn't need to open any more stores. Now, they sold furniture. So people do like to jump on the couch, I think. And we did a study of their sales on the web, just the web sales. And what we found was a huge percentage, I don't remember what it was, 80, 90%, was all within a few miles of the stores. So this idea, this metaphor of we can go all digital is a myth, and I was telling this Russian friend how in the 90s catalog company, people who wanted to start a catalog company or had a catalog company would just call out of the blue, like Blockbuster and Wyndham Records and a bunch of big companies that people had heard of, Adobe, Microsoft, anyway, and so IBM too, yeah, all that, out of the blue. And I was the catalog guy, and then the internet came along, and I was pretty convinced it wouldn't work. It would work, but it wouldn't work the way people. It wouldn't just displace everything. It doesn't work that well. It works okay. And now people are finally coming to the realization. And the Russian friend said, "Yeah, and it never did really work. It never did what was promised. No, it never really did, because it's hard to jump out of that screen. And there's a really refreshing feeling of walking away from your computer and sitting down with a catalog. You can't beat it. It's way better. It's at your leisure. You are in 100% control. And even when you're throwing out your mail, you're in 100% control. What else can you throw away with impunity in life? There's that little piece of wire that you trimmed off when you were doing the wiring, and that might come in handy when you want to rewire the seat on the lawnmower. It's true. All that's true. So don't fire the reindeer. Yeah, I'm not against Facebook or Google. Although another story I heard was um, a significant client was trying to test mail versus banner ads, and the exchanges wouldn't take their ad because they had uh, a, a spiritual basis. How about that? It wasn't bad. It's a great institution, and that one is a shocker to me, but that's the way it is. And if you depend on Fuzzbuck and Goggle, you may be out of luck if they decide that your values don't align with theirs. Something to think about. The Postal Service will deliver it nevertheless. Merry Christmas. Have a great day. Like and share. Your